There are very few film franchises in the history of cinema that are as storied and with as many entries as the James Bond franchise. Dating back to the 1960s, the only franchise I can think of that beats it out in terms of how many years it's been active in number of entries is probably the Godzilla franchise at the 1950s as well as Japan. One of the most interesting things about the Bond IP is distinctive eras within it. You have the relatively serious Sean Connery years, the almost comical Roger Moore years, the starkly serious and very personally motivated Timothy Dalton years, the mixed bag that is Pierce Brosnan, as well as the remarkably ambitiously interconnected Daniel Craig films. However, if there's one film that can personify a good Bond film, that movie is For Your Eyes Only. Though there are other examples that I might talk about in the future. The story For Your Eyes Only goes as follows. A British intelligence ship off the coast of Albania that's disguised as a fishing boat, but is in point of fact charged with directing the Polaris nuclear subfleet, is sunk off the coast of Albania after accidentally dredging aboard a sea mine. The British government then dispatches an underwater archaeologist by the name of Havelock in order to recover it. However, after his daughter is dropped off and shortly reunited with her family, he and his wife are executed by the man who delivered their daughter to them. Bond is sent to Spain in order to capture and interrogate the hitman, but he himself is captured right outside of the hitman's villa, where he of course is sent off to be executed. However, before his captors have a chance to prematurely end the film, the hitman himself is assassinated by a crossbow bolt flying in from the foliage. Bond takes this chance to sprint away and runs face first into his savior, the daughter of the archaeologist. They go to retrieve Bond's car to make a quick getaway. However, the assassin's henchmen discover it. It proceeds to self-destruct in order to prevent its theft and use outside of the British government. So they have to take her rental hatchback. Bond and his new associate Melina then proceed to elude the henchmen in a downhill drift-off. Bond asks her to go back to Albania so that way she can continue her father's work and so that way he can continue the investigation. It's also promising to keep her updated, so that way she can have closure. Bond thinks back to his capture at the hands of the assassin, and remembers seeing a mysterious man paying off the assassin. Going to Q and using facial recognition software, they discover that it's possibly connected to a Greek smuggler, so Bond is sent to Alpine, Italy to talk with an informant involved with the Greek underworld, a wealthy smuggler by the name of Ari Christados, who's played by Julian Glover, and has a pointed goatee, if that's any sign of his allegiances. Christados says that the man who paid off the assassin, Locke, in point of fact works for his primary rival, Milos Colombo, a vile smuggler who deals in all sorts of naughty things, including human beings and smack. After this meeting, Bond runs into Melina, who's been baited there by the conspiracy. After preventing an assassination attempt on her life, he convinces her to go back yet again, bolstering that he should and can be trusted with bringing justice to the man who ordered her father's death. Surviving not one, but 3 assassination attempts later, Bond eventually makes his way out of Alpine, Italy, to Albania, where he goes to inspect Colombo. Christados meets him there and points him out to Colombo and suggests seducing Colombo's mistress to get information. Bond does so and starts to develop a rapport with her, when all of a sudden the conspirator henchmen and the assassins from Alpine, Italy show up, run over the mistress to assassinate Bond. However, just before all that can happen, Colombo's henchmen rise from the ocean and harpoon one of the assassins, Tywin, allowing Locke to sprint away and to escape. They capture Bond and take him before Colombo, who reveals that it is in point of fact Christados who is the conspirator behind the sinking of the ship and the assassination of the Havelocks. In point of fact, all the way back to World War II, he's been a double agent and traitor to England and the Western powers on the whole. Colombo then proposes to prove his loyalty to the British government and Western freedom in general by taking Bond on a raid to a smuggled shipment of smack that Christados has ordered in and that Locke is overseeing. Bond with a small pack of scrappy yet charming ruffians, as well as Colombo himself, then proceed to storm the docks, take the opium, and chase Locke into a warehouse, where they then proceed to get into a fierce gunfight. However, Locke has rigged the whole place with explosives, and our main characters get the chance to see a conspicuously large and very distinctive diving suit before they discover the explosives. They then sprint out of the building before it explodes, and Bond then proceeds to sprint up a mountainside to chase after the main henchman before catching up to him and stopping his car with bullets. Then, of course, to extract justice for the mistress and an informant for MI6 that was assassinated in Alpine, Italy by said henchman, he then proceeds to throw the henchman off of a cliff. His suspicions and leads confirmed, Bond goes to Molina with the information. And in doing so, Bond asks Molina if he can find the missing ship. They go to the sunken fishing boat. Molina and Bond then proceed to swim inside of the sunken wreckage and remove the self-destruct charge from the nuclear computer so that way they can safely extract it. However, they're interrupted by a man in a giant diving suit from Christados. They're pimp-slapped around in the slow motion of underwater, and Molina has to escape because of a bit of damage to her suit. But Bond's quick thinking leads him to strap the detonation charge to the diving suit, dispatching the henchman and allowing Molina and Bond to escape with the nuclear computer. They go to the surface and find Christados waiting for them, who binds them together, steals the computer, and then proceeds to try to drag and drown them under the waves, or feeding them to the shark. Bond and Molina, however, use their quick thinking to cut the rope on the coral. Christados is about to check to see if they're dead when one of his henchmen falls off the boat and gets eaten by sharks. Convinced that there's no way they can survive, Christados leaves, completely oblivious to the fact that Molina and Bond can, in point of fact, survive. Bond and Molina figure out from Molina's father's parrot that Christados and his German contact with the Soviets are going to a place called St. Cyril's, and with help and information from Colombo, they deduce which St. Cyril's it is, a hillside monastery in Greece that Christados used as a base of operations during World War II. Bond proceeds then to climb up the side of the mountain to infiltrate the base, to bring up Colombo, Molina, and a small band of revolutionary ruffians. However, he's discovered by Christados' henchmen and almost gets thrown off the cliff until he finally manages to scrabble his way up the mountain and toss the henchmen off. He lowers down the elevator and brings the small raiding party in, to which they then proceed to capture the guards and flank Christados. Bond and the East German fight, allowing Christados to escape with the nuclear computer, until Bond tosses the East German out of a window and then proceeds to sprint after Christados. Christados is now being chased by Bond, Molina, and Colombo. The head of Soviet intelligence, General Gogol, then lands at that moment and is walking up to Christados to receive his prize. Bond then tackles Christados, preventing him from making the trade, and just when Christados is about to shank Bond, Colombo tosses a shank into Christados' back. Gogol is about to go for the nuclear computer when Bond then decides to chuck it off of a cliff, destroying it, preventing both sides from having it. Gogol, instead of acting like a cartoon villain, decides to laugh and congratulate Bond on his scrappiness and inventiveness, and then proceeds to fly off right back to the great red sky of Mother Russia. The film ends with Bond and Molina deciding to go for a small fling of it to celebrate justice for her father and patriotism for England. The film has a very convoluted plot. Its ultimate story is straightforward. Bond has to retrieve a computer, whilst also romance the daughter of a fellow patriot, to put an end to a deceitful conspiracy to supply the Soviets with basically 2 nuclear submarine fleets. However, the way the film goes about it is incredibly convoluted. It bounces from so many different locations that honestly it feels like you can never catch your breath. There's also some issues of the action. While all the things I outlined in the description show Bond as a very powerful character, and he does usually prevail in the action sequences, but he's never really given a chance to be truly amazingly proficient at anything. 9/10 of the time he's captured, and 9/10 of the time he's running away. It's by the skin of his teeth that he usually wins. This serves as both a positive and a negative, but I think mostly it just means that his character isn't really all that powerful. And I think that extends to his role in the plot as well. Bond's primary motivation in this movie is Queen and Country, and that's essentially it. He's in Greece, Alpine, Italy, and off the coast of Albania because he was told to do it as a job. He doesn't really have a reason to do anything. He's sort of just there. Also, the simple fact of the matter is, the villains really aren't that intimidating. The main heavy from Soviet Russia, Erich Kriegler, is perhaps one of the most generic henchmen there is in the entirety of the Bond franchise, only really being defeated in terms of blandness by Necros from The Living Daylights, or Stamper from Tomorrow Never Dies. There's also the simple fact that Kristatos himself really isn't all that intimidating of a villain. It really is a tragedy because initially Kristatos is a pretty clever and unique villain. He's a double agent who's playing Bond. He's playing the Soviets and the British for multiple decades before now getting defeated over the theft of a laptop. It's sort of disappointing to see his character go from clever chess master to old man running away inside of a Mr. Rogers sweater. But if I had to say in terms of complaints, that's basically all I have in terms of complaints of For Your Eyes Only. Everything else about it is basically a positive. The real characters that have any involvement in the plot and the story and really want to see anything done are the characters of Melina and Columbo. Columbo's trying to get honor back to Greece, a country that he loves, and to gain his reputation back, which has been stolen from him by Kristatos and his lies. Columbo's also an extremely charming man who's getting revenge for the death of his lover, and is also the decisive factor between Kristatos being able to sell the nuclear laptop to General Gogol and not, because of the information that he has about Sensirols. Then of course there's Melina Havelock. Melina Havelock may be one of the best Bond girls ever made. This film really is sort of a mixed bag with its Bond girls, because on one half you have the character of Bibi, who's this almost child who's desperate to become physically intimate with Bond, or even Kriegler at one point before it's revealed that he's an antagonist. She's just sort of forgettable and annoying. But Melina makes up for everything that Bibi has done. She's charming, she's intelligent, she's a leader amongst men, she's more than able to take over her father's operation. It's implied that she spends years being trained to do so. She's an executioner with a crossbow and pert near an action hero in her own right, as well as being lovely, witty, and personally, she has more to do with the plot than anybody else. The best shot in the entire film from a cinematography standpoint is a snap zoom right to her face when she is silently vowing revenge on the executioner of her parents. You see her magnificent fiery green emeralds of eyes screaming with pain and shouting with rage that this is not over. She's the best part of the movie, and a direct contradiction of the statement that there's never been any strong female Bond girls who are just pure sex. And honestly, it's kind of a crime that she's not usually thought of more often. Roger Moore is at his most charming as Bond in this movie. While he's not the most powerful man alive inside of this movie, he is significantly one of the most polite. There's a section in the middle of the film where this woman tries to seduce Bond. She's almost a child, and he, in the most polite way possible, says no. Bond, in point of fact, hardly gets any at all in this movie, except for maybe once in the middle of the plot. And with the primary Bond girl of the film, the action hero that is Melina Havelock, he saves it till the very end, and he's always very patient, calm, and respectful with her. In point of fact, Roger Moore's Bond is probably, in terms of his interactions and his dialogue, is one of the best versions that there is. Then, of course, we get the only good villains in this movie. Locke, the primary henchman of Kristatos in the first half of the film, is perhaps one of the more intimidating and, quite frankly, enigmatic villains that Bond has. He's not really a man who's a straightforward action antagonist, but at the same time, he's always on the front lines. He's the one who serves as the primary antagonist for the first half of the film, and he does a great job. There's always a question of what's going on behind those steel-rimmed glasses that he's wearing, and he always makes decisions very well on the fly. Needless to say, the set piece with him getting tossed off of a cliff is perhaps one of the most entertaining and powerful in the whole film. It caps off one of the most important plot developments in the whole film. But what's the best antagonist in the movie? It's General Gogol. General Gogol, on the whole, is probably the jewel in the crown of the Moore era. General Gogol is a Soviet antagonist, but he's not a cartoonishly evil Soviet antagonist that wants to destroy Western civilization. He just wants to see Mother Russia prevail, and he just wants to see Mother Russia safe. He's sort of like M, but Russian. And honestly, in this movie, seeing him laugh and cackle at Bond in a sort of almost friendly rapport, it's incredibly refreshing to see an antagonist inside of the Bond universe act with a sense of professionalism that isn't based out of violence or anger. He's also one of the most rewarding characters to see the arc of across all the films, from The Spy Who Loved Me all the way to A View to a Kill. Now, those are the story elements of this movie, and where do I even go in a technical element? This movie is frankly magnificent. While the soundtrack by Bill Conti and the primary theme of the film by Sheena Easton are an acquired taste, you'll eventually learn to enjoy them. But really, it's the other technical elements that make this film shine. The action set pieces, the editing, the cinematography, the special effects, it's all magnificent. The editing across this film is seamless, especially inside of the chase sequences. There's a scene later on in this film that feels like a coked up version of Cool Runnings, and it's shot magnificently. The sound effects, the sound mixing. Carol Bouquet doesn't even speak in this movie. Someone dubs her over, but you can't tell because the editing and how it matches up with the lip movements of Carol Bouquet is just so seamless. The special effects are magnificent. Everything about this film on a technical level just works. The only real moments of the film in which the technical elements don't really look all that great come with retrospect and knowledge that Carol Bouquet couldn't go underwater, so when there are some genuine underwater moments, the wig on the woman that's supposed to be Melina Havelock is sort of noticeable. But beyond that, there's really no huge issues on a technical level. So what is For Your Eyes Only? For Your Eyes Only is a convolutedly plotted adventure film to prevent the apocalypse of Western civilization at the hands of an affable communist and a greedy turncoat who's being opposed by a revenge-driven Greek Lara Croft and James Bond. And if that doesn't sound like a good Saturday afternoon on streaming, then honestly, there's not many other movies I could recommend to you that would be much better. This is Pontius Porcius, signing off.
Wenn alle Mädchen wären